I think the one thing I would say to leaders today is try to find ways to be more people focused first. And if you can get to that place, I can almost guarantee your performance and your bottom line is going to go up.
Welcome to Be Bold Branding, where we discuss the power of differentiating yourself through your own unique story and standout personal brand. Today's guest is not only a client of ours, but a great friend. Scot Heathman is a speaker, upcoming author, and founder of Elevating Others. He inspires CEOs and frontline leaders to command with courage so they can unleash the force within their team, ignite their innovative spirit, and skyrocket their bottom line. Let's learn about Scot and his story.
Scott, welcome to Be Bold Branding.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see you both.
It's great to see you as always. And we're going to dig into some really juicy stuff here today. But we like to start with a little bit of background of the guest. So you want to tell us a little bit about your very impressive military background and what led you to that, and then a little segue into what we're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Minnesota native. I was actually born on an Air Force base in Nebraska at Offutt Air Force Base, but eventually we made the journey east over to Minnesota. And I've always wanted to be a pilot. And, people ask me, well, what was that inspiration or what was that person that put you on that path? I like to say it was Luke Skywalker, and everybody knows who Luke Skywalker is. I mean, if you don't, well, I don't know if we're going to be friends or not. But
luckily, I can be your friend.
Yes. No, it was Star Wars. When I saw Star Wars as a young boy, I was just inspired. Like, one, how did they even make this movie? But two, I want to fly the Millennium Falcon someday, right? That's, as a kid, that's the kinds of things you think about. But I literally sat on that all the way through high school and said, this is something I want to do. I want to serve my country. I want to fly airplanes. My dad was in the Air Force. He was drafted in the late 60s. And, he always told me, he's like, look, if you want to fly airplanes, you got to have a college degree and you got to go in as an officer. So, those are the kind of the two things I really honed in on and said, all right, I got to find a way to get to college and then graduate and then certainly find my way to pilot training. So I ended up getting an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And so I took that money and went to the Illinois Institute of Technology. I thought you had to have an engineering degree. So I went into civil engineering and it turns out, no, you don't need an engineering degree. You just need to have good grades. So, but I was lucky enough to get a pilot training slot. And this is something that not everybody gets to do. So I'm truly humbled and blessed to have done it because it's tough to go through the flight physical process and the selection process. And then the training itself is a year long. And so I went down to Del Rio, Texas, spent my year at pilot training, which if you could describe pilot training, I would say it's like spending 10 hours a day going through driver's training and getting a test every day. I mean,
That's intense.
It's not fun, but it's a blast, right? It's right. A love-hate relationship. But after I graduated and got those silver wings, I was off and running, flying tankers in the Air Force. And I did that for about 5 years. And then I moved over to airlift, flew the C-17, which a lot of people have seen that on the news. C-17 is one of the most advanced airlifters in the world. And so I spent about the first 10 years flying airplanes. And but the other thing that the Air Force wants out of its officer corps is they want you to lead, right? So you can't just fly airplanes your entire life. They want you to start leading teams and doing those things. So I had the opportunity to command a flying squadron up in New Hampshire and had a blast doing that. But we had to maintain readiness to go to war at any time. We sent a lot of people overseas deployed off to the Middle East and all across the globe. And then I've had an opportunity to work some, unique staff opportunities at the Pentagon and also at Air Mobility Command, which is kind of the center of the universe for all things logistical that has to go by air. So, but probably the biggest accomplishment, which, when I got into the Air Force, you're not really thinking about, well, where am I going to be in 20, 25 years? I got to command an Air Force base. And honestly, that was the last thing from my mind when I joined the Air Force. I was like, those people are old. Like, there's no way I'm going to do that. And sure enough, I got that opportunity in 2019 to command Scot Air Force Base, funny enough, here in Illinois. And it was absolutely incredible. But it's a huge responsibility. I mean, if you think about the mayor of a fairly decent sized city or town, that's what I got. I got all that stuff to care for, all those people and families, security, fire departments, clinics, and a runway. It's a lot to care for. And but you don't do it alone. No leader does any of this kind of stuff alone. And I had a remarkable team that did all the heavy lifting each and every day. And it was my job to keep us all just going in the right direction. And we had a few interesting bumps here and there. And, like a global pandemic, a 200-year flood, some minor things. But we navigated it all. And I was pretty proud of that team and pretty proud of the time I had with them. But it eventually came to an end in 2022 when I retired after about 25 years, and then decided to start my own business and stay in the leadership and development kind of industry. And so now I do a lot of coaching, I do a lot of teaching, and I do a lot of speaking. So that's what my business is really based on and how I deliver service to others.
Well, obviously there are a million questions that come to my mind, and we could make this thing hours long if we wanted to, because I'm fascinated, and I hope the listeners are too, and maybe even specifically one, the leadership aspect of this is something that's lacking in business America, whether that's a one-person show or whether that's thousands that. And I'm sure you would agree. That's why you're in that space. Talk to us a little bit about leadership and like what that means, like how that can affect, small to mid-sized companies. And
yeah, for me, I think my foundation and kind of like what I would say my operating system or my leadership style has been servant leader from day one. I didn't always understand the terms. And I can remember when I worked for a base commander many, many years ago, like 2002 timeframe. And I would definitely call him a servant leader. But the things that I saw him doing where he was focused not only on the mission absolutely was important, but he was people first, people over everything. That had to come first, because the mission ain't going to get done without the people. And he was growing them. He was developing them. It just everything he did. And I got a front seat to watch this all unfold in front of me. Everything he did had intentionality. So he didn't do anything that wasn't going to get some sort of an impact out of somebody or grow somebody or inspire someone or get us to a better place. And it was amazing to watch him operate. And he kept kind of nudging me to go after my master's degree. And I finally did. I ended up going to Gonzaga University and getting an organizational leadership degree. But I ended up focusing and getting a concentration in servant leadership. And once I understood a little bit more of the academic background of it, the educational background, everything that Robert Greenleaf kind of put out in the universe about servant leadership, a light bulb just clicked for me. I was like, that's who I am. And I think it's important that a leader needs to understand, who are they? What kind of style do they have? Does it fit with the organization? If it doesn't fit, here's the great thing. You can maneuver. You're not you're not done. You're not a broken toy, right? We can all grow, and that is so important. I think for leaders to understand that they don't just have to operate under a single style or, iron fist all the time. There are other styles per given situations that are going to be much more effective. But I think the one thing I would say to leaders today is try to find ways to be more people focused first. And if you can get to that place, I can almost guarantee your performance and your bottom line is going to go up. Because these are the things that if you read anything today, any Gallup poll, any global workplace study, look at the things where when people are not first, engagement, levels of trust. Number one, why people leave their jobs, it's because of a bad relationship with their boss. I mean, all these things still matter, and those should serve as a means to want to change or want to grow and almost refocus in other areas so that you can put a people lens on things and just elevate your organizations beyond belief.
Do you think that optimism, like an eternal optimism, is a huge characteristic in that leadership role, or do you think that it's like, I'll just leave it there? How important is optimism to a leader?
I think some people are just naturally optimistic. Some people kind of grow into that. I myself would say that, yeah, I'm an optimist. I don't think it's 100% necessary in every situation. I think there's going to be some situations where maybe processes are not working out, or there's a certain policy in effect that's hurting the organization. That's not the time to throw optimism and say, well, it's all going to work out, right? No, sometimes you got to get in there and fix it. So maybe it does take a step, taking a step back, maybe admitting, this policy I thought would be effective, this thing's garbage right now. Let's throw it away. Let's get a couple people around the table and let's look at this from a couple different vantage points instead of just mine. I do believe, though, having a high level of optimism certainly helps us from the standpoint of the individual to be able to maneuver beyond adversity in our lives, and especially in our work lives, because what's happening at home, we're going to bring with us in the car ride to work. And we can put on a happy face and fake it till you make it, but all we're doing is putting more stress and resistance on ourselves from really what's happening. And those are times when I think even the best optimism may not be enough to get you through. You're going to need some other tools within that resilience toolkit. But without it, I don't think you can overcome as much. I still think it's a powerful emotion to have within your core, to almost kind of act as a catalyst to maneuver through some of the toughest times that a company or business or an individual might be going through.
That's a great answer. I knew it would be a great answer. Your insight to these things and your experience level are very clear.
Absolutely. Like what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button and learn how you can change how you're seen and charge what you're worth. And Scott, we mentioned at the beginning of the episode that most of your work is done with the CEOs and the frontline leaders. Tell us some things those people have in common. So if you're in that position out there and you're listening right now and you think, okay, maybe my leadership skills could use some work, or I would like to be the highest level leader I could possibly be. What are some things that would indicate to them that they need to be working with you?
I hear a lot of times like something very specific about, well, I need to work on my executive presence, or I need to work on strategic communication, or this and that. Those are all great things to work on. I go a little deeper. So I start asking, the question, why? Almost like a child, like why? To do what? If you get this, what are you going to do with it? To inspire whom? To enable what? And eventually we come back to a foundation that I think is absolutely critical for everybody, which is emotional intelligence. We've got to understand our levels of self-awareness, self-management, or self-regulation, as Daniel Goleman pointed out, our social awareness, how we interact with the environment and those around us. And then eventually, what does our relationship management look like? And when we can work on those, and again, it starts with self-awareness. If we can work on those 4 key areas and raise our level of emotional intelligence, the beautiful thing about EQ or EI, whatever acronym you've seen out there, is that when you work on that skill set, which is a growth skill set, not something like your IQ or your personality, which is not likely to change over time. But if you work on your EQ, you'll see changes in your anger management. If you've got anger issues, your stress tolerance, your communication skills, your overall resilience. So you're not just getting a 1-for-1 because of that investment. You're getting like a 5 or 6 to 1, which is something I don't think a lot of organizations think about when they're looking at, well, how should we develop folks within our organization? I am almost in a biblical sense, a disciple of EQ first. Let's start there, and let's run ourselves through an assessment, through a course, and understand what we're dealing with first, and we'll build from there. Everybody has EQ, but we have different levels within those 4 components of how we're interacting in the day-to-day world here. And if we can get an awareness of that, we now have a first step where to grow, and you're going to see other areas of that person also grow and get even better. And now you got a culture that understands how to interact with each other, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Boy, that's a perfect operating environment. So
Agreed. Yeah. And is that like, I think I know the answer to this, but that doesn't have to be that the leader has to perfect that EQ in himself or herself before they start working with a team. That's something you can almost interact and everybody sort of grow together, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like one perfect example, self-management was one of my lower components when I took an EQ assessment. I had a high self-awareness and a high social awareness, but self-management was a little bit lower. So I focused on growing that skill. And so one of the ways I did this, you ever notice that in an organization, when the leader walks into the office and they're in a grumpy mood, everybody else tends to walk on eggshells, and the conspiracies start flying like, man, I wonder if he kicked his dog, or did him and his spouse have a fight? Or, it's crazy what employees will, in their heads, what they'll think about. So here's what I started doing. And I'm a pretty happy person when I come to work. Not that I don't have crappy days. I certainly have had those. But what I had to realize about myself is if my emotion changes too radically, too quickly, that actually might spook the herd a little bit. And so I started thinking about that and being a little bit more intentional. So I can remember coming in to work and, I walked past like 20, 30 people, and we had a staff meeting that morning. And I could tell, like, I went right into the office. I wasn't saying hi to everybody like I normally do. And I just went in the office and I, put my stuff down. I was thinking about something that happened the night before. And as I was walking down the hall to the conference room, I started to realize that I have already put some bad things in motion here. So I came into the conference room and everybody was a little bit, you could tell, like the feelings were different, almost as if they were whispering to each other, like, oh, the boss is not in a good mood, it looks like. I sat down at the table and I said, hey, folks, I just want to tell you all, I'm not myself this morning. A couple things went down last night. We had a late night on base due to this issue, but please don't take any of my emotion personal. I want to be here. This is important. And, let's make the best of this meeting. And if I need a pick me up, give me a pick me up. It completely took the defenses down.
Absolutely.
Right?
And next thing you know, we're joking and we're ribbing around, and it helped me pull myself out of what I was still thinking about, which I didn't need to think about anymore. It all helped. So I think something like that, being a little bit vulnerable,
Yeah,
is
that was the
so
word I was
critical.
going to use.
It's so
Mhm.
critical. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is critical. Well, Scott, this might be a great time to transition into another part of the conversation I wanted to have with you. So, the end of your journey in the military, the end was rather interesting. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, right before I became the base commander here at Scott Air Force Base, I was involved in a car accident. We got hit from behind at a stoplight. And then through them looking at me and MRIs and X-rays and stuff, they found a brain tumor that I didn't know I had. Matter of fact, the doctor called me and said, "Do you know you have a brain tumor?" And I'll tell you, that's not a question that you're prepared to get,
Ever.
on a Friday morning. Um, and I can remember saying, "No, is that bad?" Almost as if to kind of, I don't think had it really hit me. And
Right.
um, so yeah, it did hit me probably a couple hours later, and it was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? So we spent the better part of a year just kind of watching this thing because it wasn't affecting me. Like I said, I didn't even know I had it, and I was actively flying and doing all the normal things that anybody would do. Um, but as soon as they found that, flying for me stopped. I had a lot of appointments, a lot of MRIs, so many that I could probably stick to the refrigerator after about a year. But um, so I was in Spokane, Washington when I found this out. So after about 6 months, I moved to be the base commander at Scott here in Illinois. And so I entered the job knowing this. And again, I didn't feel it was necessary to tell a lot of people because it really wasn't affecting me. And I wanted to stay focused and keep the wing focused in the right place. But after about 6 months here at Scott, I started to feel some things like my face was getting numb and the left side of my body felt a little off. I was even walking with a little bit of a limp that one of my executive assistants, he noticed it and, asked me, did you injure yourself? I'm like, no. And he knew I had the brain tumor. I said, I think it's starting to affect me. So I called the neurosurgeon. This was January of 2020. And he said, yeah, we probably need to move real quick here. And because it had been growing to the point where it's starting to affect other things in the brain. And so a month later, I was in an operation for about 10 hours to get this brain tumor or at least as much as they could. It was kind of in a tough place at the base of my brain to operate. So they got about 85% of it. And then by the time I got home, I was in the hospital for 3 days, got discharged. I could barely walk. I couldn't see hardly at all. I had such bad double vision. I had no balance. I couldn't hear in this ear, and it's still permanently gone at this point. There was some tumor that had gone into the ear that they had to pull off as well. So that kind of ruined the hearing there. Basically, you're almost a child again. So as you would expect, I came out of the job. My deputy took command of the wing, and that's why we have continuity in the military, and it worked great. Yeah. He took the wing, and I was at home. They told me maybe 8-9 months it would take for me to heal up. It only took me about 3.5, and maybe that's where some of that optimism came into play, right?
Right.
I was like, you know what? I want my job back, and I want it back bad. And, I just felt like that was my responsibility. And so I started going to all kinds of therapy, physical, occupational, speech. I was walking outside with a walker. And when I got better, I started walking with a cane. When I got better after that, I started walking without a cane. I mean, just small steps, right? But really stuck to it. And after about 3.5 months on 1 June, I put my backpack on and went back into work. And it was hard, you know, because a brain injury, you don't realize how sensitive your brain is. And when you're sitting in front of a computer, you're taking in all kinds of information, or maybe there's other noise in the room or whatever. It was tough to get back to work because of so much that was coming my way. And I had to get really smart about reworking the schedule that worked for me. And I'll say that the pandemic, in a way, kind of slowed life down for all of us. But for someone like me that was dealing with all that, it was actually the perfect thing to kind of just let me focus on me a little bit. And I wasn't going to evening events after working a full day. And I mean, we weren't doing any of that stuff. But I still knew, you know, running a base is pretty darn important. And you know, we weren't going to screw that up. And I certainly wasn't going to let my health get in the way. So if there was ever something I felt like I wasn't 100%, well, I just brought the team in closer, and we all just worked together. And later that year, I did go through radiation to get the rest of the tumor, and that seems to have done it. And so far from 2020, things are holding stable, and I'm pretty happy about it. But I'm a firm believer that, you know, you don't let a good crisis go to waste. You got to learn something about these. And so I spent a lot of time journaling and talking to others about, how did I maneuver through this? Like, what did it take? What was the mindset that I used? What was the kind of the game plan here? What are some of the maneuvers that I put into my life to kind of help me? And that's where I spent a lot of time talking to airmen and others across the base and in the community is, hey, this is how I maneuvered beyond this adversity. And, you know, I don't think it's a magic bullet for everybody, but I think some of the things that I talk about certainly will aid any type of adversity. Things like accepting what's happened to you, identifying a path forward, you know, illuminate that, the little steps that you can take and not worry about choices you can't make. And then you got to mobilize a team like I did, you know, your network, your friends, family, resources. But eventually you got to take that first step. And that first step in that walker out of my house was a tough one. So, but it was a necessary one, you know?
I bet. And it really in a fantastic, I don't know that's the right adjective, but I mean, you know, running a base, that responsibility in and of itself is mesmerizing. And then having to assemble a team to help you do that, even completely healthy, is mesmerizing. And then having this kind of an injury, like just sprung upon you, right? And then now I've got to deal with this, and now I'm out of it somewhat safely, but I've got to relearn all of my communication skills, my motor skills, and get back in there. It's a testimony, honestly, of your leadership and why people should, you know, go to Scot Heathman for leadership training, because you clearly put together a great team. They obviously respected you. And then for you to say, you know, I'm going to overcome this in half the time, and a little less than half the time actually than they anticipated, because I want my job back. All that's fantastic to me. Like, in the world that I grew up in, it's so foreign that it's amazing. I'm mesmerized by it.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, oh my goodness, yes.
I kept thinking about, I'm a huge Tom Brady fan. So when he went down in 2008 with a knee injury, I was like, that's what I'm thinking about. I want back in that game. And, you know, you can't control the time. You really can't. But you can put in the work and let that kind of guide what's happening. And were there setbacks? Absolutely, there were setbacks. But that's where, again, I learned, I adapted, used what I had, and then continued to move forward. So, you know, it's a constant learning process. But when I treated it like that, I think it made me even stronger. And it wasn't buried in the, oh, woe's me. Why did this happen to me? I certainly had those moments. You know, I'm not ever going to say that I didn't. I I just didn't have as many of them,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Or
So
give in to them. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, which is
yeah,
so important. Yeah, yeah. You know, there's actually a line in a song that I like a lot, and the guy's like, "You learn the game, and at best you're a student."
mhm,
Right, and I love that
absolutely.
line.
Yeah,
And he may have
Yeah.
stole it from somebody else. I don't know, but I love it because it's so great. You know, and but I think as leaders, you have to take on that, don't you? You know, there's always something else to learn, and we can always be better at what we do. Um, you know,
Absolutely.
constantly striving for that next foot forward.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Well, Scott, I appreciate you sharing your story with us, and obviously, this is one of the many reasons that we are so proud and honored to have been able to work with you and help you build your brand. So, I have a few questions about your branding journey that I think people listening that are thinking about building their own brand would really enjoy your answers to this. So, first of all, the biggest, like a kid, like the question, why, why? Why did you come into the program in the first place?
yeah. I had a pretty clear purpose for my business, and the name of my business is elevating others, and that's my purpose. That's been pretty clear to me even a couple years before I left the military, that that's what I want to do someday, is continue to elevate others. But where I started getting a little bit confused was, well, I've got this idea of a company, of a business in my head, but what about me? And and I struggled a little bit with, like, how do you separate the organization from who you are? Because we all have a personal brand within us. We just don't all have or have had the ability to kind of tease it out. And I'll never forget, the first note I think you sent me, Tanya, on LinkedIn was, you had seen my profile, and I know you worked with a lot of small businesses and larger organizations and help people with obviously personal branding. And I was highly interested because I knew there was a disconnect, but I didn't quite know yet. I just I didn't know what I didn't know. And I said, well, I would be very interested to learn more about what you're doing. And I had just taught a class um, to some civilians in the Air Force, again, through some of the work I do. We were talking about personal branding. Now I was just hitting kind of the surface level of why this is important. I said, think of it in the sense of, well, how do you separate yourself as the expert on this particular topic within your organization? How is the leader going to know, like, you're the person that I should go to? If you, and it's not about being the loudest. It's not about
Right.
being a jerk. It's not about, being the happiest. It's just the little things that you can do, the way that you communicate both verbally and non-verbally to the world, so that people notice you. And I obviously didn't speak with Yoda, and you are my Yoda in this. And so once I started spending time with BrandFace, I was like, oh, this is way more than I thought it was. And I was so thankful to just have that kind of expertise, because, spending the time that we did with interviews, getting to know me and what I stand for, even the goofy side of me, why fight any of that? You know,
Right.
like I said earlier, when you're doing this whole fake it till you make it, that's actually a lot more stress than if you were just your authentic self,
Mhm.
you
Very
know?
true.
So I think once, we kind of teased out who I was within my business, I think the doors were just opening for me, and I became a lot more comfortable when I speak to people, even when I'm coaching or training. They know exactly who I am. They're like, that's the guy who's not afraid to bring a lightsaber into training because he's a Star Wars nerd, right? But you know what? They'll never forget me.
Right.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
I it's not a matter of, well, I want everybody's money now. I want to feel authentic first, so that I can put my full self into them, because that's the most important person when I'm doing my business, is my customer. and they should know very clearly who they are dealing with and the type of person that I am, whether I'm talking or they see it on a website or uh, on a social media post or whatever. But they're like, "Yep, that's the guy who's the Jedi. That's the guy
Yeah.
who does this." And I love that about personal branding, and I'm so thankful you all teased that out of me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, to the point that the lightsaber is actually part of your logo and the brand identifier, it's that, 3 or 4 word tagline that says, "This is what I want to be known for, and
mhm.
this is who I am," right? And yours is command with courage.
Mhm.
Tell me, what were the first thoughts, that went through your mind when we presented that option to you?
I mean, when you hear it for the first time, you're kind of like feeling around in this room, like, is this really me? Is this it?
Yes.
But I tell you, for me, it only took a few seconds, and I was like, yeah, that's it. I think if I would have thought 10 years ago using the courage word, I don't, I guess personally, I didn't think long ago that word really fit with me because I have an image of courage, like a first responder or, someone does search and rescue or, a daredevil or whatever. But, some folks have reminded me over time, like, you're a pilot in the Air Force. That's actually kind of dangerous, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess it is at times, but we train pretty hard not to put ourselves in danger. But yeah, we are in harm's way, and we put others in harm's way. And I think I had to get comfortable with my own self that that's an okay thing for me to say about me. Um,
Mhm.
and and then again, the word command that fits so well because command just isn't about barking orders and telling people what to do. Command is command of myself, command of how I lead. When we talk about command, it is kind of settled down into a nice little acronym that Tanya, you and I have kind of talked a lot about things like collaboration and owning
Mhm.
your own behaviors and redirecting your fears and embracing your vulnerability as a superpower. So we've talked about a lot of these different words because this is kind of the way that I lead, and I hope that I could inspire other leaders to dive into, not give up the other skills they have, but look at other things a little differently that could actually add, you know, more to their bottom line potentially,
Mhm.
if they could harness this. So um, it fit very well. And again, I think the first image that popped in my head was a Jedi. And I'm like, when I think of everything I've read about a Jedi, they absolutely command with courage. It doesn't mean they're
Yeah.
not afraid, but it does mean that they can overcome and they can keep moving forward. So,
Yeah, I could tell you, sir, that from the outside looking in, and we talk about that with BrandFace a lot. We tell our clients it's hard to read your own label when you're the one inside the jar, and that's what we do, and it's the gift of what we love most about what we do. And I can assure you, you are courageous.
Yes.
Yeah, for everybody else
Yeah.
out here
I
looking
believe that
in,
too.
you have done some very courageous things,
Yes.
and overcome massive, massive things. And to help others and to have that servant leadership spirit about you is
Yes.
what's most powerful, I would say. So,
And it's definitely, triple, if not quadruple entendre, Scott, because sometimes it's giving somebody permission to be courageous enough to be themselves.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
Right,
that's a
it's on
lot.
so many
Yeah.
levels. Now, it's not just the typical, idea of courage that we all have, which is magnanimous, right? It's worthy in and of itself, but it's that courage
Yeah.
to be who you really are and command from that place.
Yes, and I could tell you from a person who has been in my careers in places of leadership, I can tell you that I am still trying to figure that out. Like, but it's because it's like she said, giving people permission to be who themselves, that in and of itself takes courage with people. And there's a lot of people that need your service, just to help with that, you know. Let me ask you this, like, what was the most eye-opening part of going through BrandFace, you think?
I think it was honestly during the interviews. What, you know, I when I first started this journey with you all, you know, I had my vision of maybe what we were going to go through, but you know, after I kind of went through the process, which was very straightforward, the interview process to me was the most enlightening because I think it wiped away a little bit of imposter syndrome for me. You know, I think we all have it to some
Excellent
degree,
point.
right? Sure. And I think I just, like you said, Tanya, verbalizing it sometimes, that does give permission to say it's okay to feel this way. You can feel like you're courageous. It's not being braggadocious or anything like that. And I think to a degree, because I spent so many years in the military, and I think a lot of veterans go through this, you know, the toughest part is the transition. I hate actually using the word military transition when folks move into the civilian workforce. It's a transformation. It is not a transition, because you need to understand you're going to go through a whole lot. You're going to have emotions tied to it. It's not going to be automatic. And like I said, I think I had to wipe away a little bit of imposter syndrome, and it's okay to be humble, but it is okay to recognize who you are
and your accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It totally is okay. How do you feel that that your brand is already helping you, Scott?
There's so a lot of my friends that have seen the brand out there, like in social media and things like that, I think the most common response is, "Oh, that's so you." Like, so what that means to me is like, that's validation. Like, they get me and they see it. They're like, yes, that makes sense. For some of the new clients I've worked with, they're intrigued a little bit. You know, they're like, what's the lightsaber for? And I'm like, well, let's talk about that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's a sense of curiosity to it. I will say at times, I think people get thrown off by the word command. I love that word. And just like we talked about it here, that word is not meaning some Patton-esque figure up on the hill saying we're going to take the bigger hill. You know, it's in whatever role you serve. You can lead, you can executive direct with courage. You can, you know, you can supervise with courage. You can manage with courage. You can follow with courage. Mm-hmm. If you're one of the lower folks within your own organization. So I love explaining that to people, that is meant to serve as almost a tool of self-awareness, that you can be more, you know, if you're willing to take that step, that growth step. And that can be very, very tough. And I think when I work with folks, especially on the coaching side, I'm certainly empathetic, and I love hearing about some of these things that folks are dealing with, because I've been there. I've led organizations from 3 people to 36,000. Okay. So I have been there and I've seen it. And yeah, you can't lead all 36,000 people, but you got to get really good at being comfortable with delegating and empowerment. And at times when you're speaking to large audiences, you got to be true to who you are. Otherwise, they're not going to believe the person on the stage. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it all makes a difference. And that's kind of the angles that I approach leadership and development with, is these other superpowers that folks do have. They just probably are not tapping into them like they should. So
good point. And I love that, you know, you just brought it crystal clear for me. You know, not only did you have to figure out how to lead yourself, but over time, you can't lead 36,000 people. You have to teach other leaders how to lead
Mhm.
in
Yes.
their own ways. And basically, now you're poised perfectly for exactly what you're doing right now. So, Scott, I cannot tell you what an absolute pleasure it has been working with you, and your friendship, gaining your friendship along the way has been far more valuable than that. So, thank you for all you've meant to us.
Well, I would reciprocate. Doing business with you all has not felt like work. It's been work to me internally, but like our relationship, I think, is the way that you approached um, the work and the craft that you have and do. I absolutely love it, and I don't hesitate to tell anybody that is also searching for a personal brand or just trying to figure out who they are. I'm like, let me introduce you to Mike and Tanya, and because I think they see how much it's helped, and like I said, you both approach this with a high level of care that I really do appreciate. So I loved working with you both.
Thank you so much. Now,
Thank you for that.
yes, absolutely. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, Scott, and learn how to be a leader and command with courage themselves.
Absolutely. So you can always go to elevatingothersllc.com. So that's my website. You can find me on LinkedIn under J. Scot Heathman. If you're wondering what the J stands for, that's Jeremiah. So I'm just a middle name guy. And yeah, that's probably the best place. Or even if you want to hit me up on email, it's Scott with 1 T at elevatingothersllc.com.
Awesome. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate all the time today.
Ready to change how you're seen and charge what you're worth? If you're not getting enough opportunities to meet with ideal customers, or the prospects you're meeting with just aren't ideal, it's most likely your brand that's holding you back. So if you're a coach, consultant, or expert who is on the rise, you need our ultimate guide to a freedom-based brand. Download it free now at BrandFaceGuide.com.